Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pitts. This is a US election special, giving you a kind of weekly update, thoughts about certain things happening in news. So much is happening that it's impossible for me to completely cover everything, of course. One of the biggest events that has happened yesterday, and that was a huge rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. So if you remember, this is the place where the first attempt to assassinate Donald Trump took place, and it was that kid on top of the roof, really unsure as to what his motivations were. He was looking into doing possibly the same at a Biden rally. It was thought initially by particularly Republicans he was thought to be this kind of Democratic operative, but actually he is a bit of a confusing one. It appears to be all over the place on the political front. At his college, or high school, he was espousing lots of conservative views, right-wing viewpoints, and he appears to have been I don't know, probably just an unhinged kid. And so the narrative over what happened there changed quite quickly, as it was very evident that he wasn't some kind of wingnut leftist trying to do that. However, it's still been capitalized upon in a campaign sense, and you would expect that. This isn't a criticism of what Trump has done, but here is an opportunity for him to, I mean, where I would criticize him is when he's brought out as assassination trainers, trying to sell them on the back, really trying to grift on the back of that to try and raise funds. But again, it fits into the whole remit of how do we take this thing that's happened and use it to the advantage of the campaign. So that's the financial side of it. And then they've gone back to have this rally that was quite a success. It was well attended. And as you can see from this picture, well attended. And I think from what I can see, I didn't watch the rally. I've seen snippets of it. But from analysts I've listened to, he did a much better job of staying on script. I think some of it was quite scripted. Like where he's been going wrong recently is having long 90-minute rambles. And there was an interesting article that came out where they had interviewed people who have gone to his rallies and who have left his rallies early. So he's getting into a lot of people are criticizing his rallies, or you've got a lot of left-wing sites showing crowds of people leaving, or streams of people leaving, or people behind him like getting off their seats and halfway through just upping sticks and going. And so he's then got wind of these criticisms. He's tried to give an answer for why people are doing that and deny it, etc., etc. But what was interesting in the article is that people say they're leaving because he often starts speaking an hour late. Right, so they've got things to do, literally like the logistics of like, oh, I'm going to go to this rally, then after that I'm going to do this and do that. And actually, if he's coming to speak an hour late and then goes on for an hour and a half, you're like, I've got to go. And also boredom. People are genuinely like, yeah, there's only so much I could take. So all these different range of things, but it's not great. The thing that the Democrats have done quite well is having really high energy rallies where they have lots of music, it's blaring, there's anticipation, and also the speeches are scripted. So it's teleprompter speeches. So you are saying exactly what you need to say. Everything is on point. There is not a word wasted, and you have your agenda. You've got your topics. Bish bash bosh. You've got speech writers who write that. You deliver it. Everyone's up for it, and then you go. Bish bash bosh. Done. Leave. No one's leaving early. It's really high energy. Everyone's up for it, and it's very meticulously planned. Now, Trump's rallies are just not that. Now, you could argue that's great. He's doing things unscripted. He doesn't need to read from a teleprompter. You could build a case where somehow that is the right thing for him to do. I would say it's not the right thing for him to do. He is so low energy. He has been so low energy. This is a little bit of a different one, and I'll talk about this. So he has been low energy, and he rambles for an hour and a half, and he goes off script, and actually he's not even making sense from a syntactical point of view, like actually grammatically not making sense with much of what he says. And also the topics he brings up and stuff he talks about, and you could go back to the old Hannibal Lecter stuff, is just not relevant. Like a lot of it is superfluous to what he needs to do. And therefore, if you've got a 90-minute rambling superfluous speech, you're just not being on point from a campaign point of view. His strategists must be pulling their hair out. Now, this rally he was much more on speech, much more on point, because he was more scripted. The first 15 minutes was actually talking about other people, like the people who died and commemorating them at the Butler original rally. And although Trump doesn't really like talking about other people, this was correct, and it was kind of somber and well put together, and Ave Maria and all this kind of stuff. Then he gets onto his speech, and actually his speech was a little bit more energetic than he has been, and that's when you've got a really big crowd, all that anticipation, and you're better scripted and you stay on point, then you're going to deliver a better rally. And this rally seems to have been better from those points of views. And there was a lot of people there. So it was good from his point of view that it was well attended and much better delivered. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's much better delivered than it has been. And it had Elon Musk there as well. And Elon Musk was prancing around, lots of memes about him jumping up and down, and it was all a bit cringe, and his speech was all a bit cringe. I just want to point this out. Lots of people are using this as an example of where he started, where he's at now. So Elon, and I'm halfway through a book called Character Limit about him taking over Twitter, because I always criticize him. I need to make sure I know what happened and whether I understand him as a person. So I'm halfway through the book. It's absolutely fascinating. Gary Kasparov says here, free speech equals my speech, neutrality equals my side, objectivity equals my views, same as it ever was. This is so concisely put and so on point, which is to say, and I've said this for a long time, and I've written articles on how Elon Musk is a free speech absolutist, and he only believes in free speech as long as that speech agrees with what his views are. Otherwise, he's not a free speech absolutist. So here, he started off by saying, for Twitter to deserve public trust, and this is what he said in 2022, it must be politically neutral, which effectively means upsetting the far right and the far left equally. So that's where he started off with Twitter, and this is where he's at now. Trump Vance must win. I can't handle 4 years of seeing and hearing Kamala Waltz. That would be cruel and unusual punishment. He's also said that this election, if Harris wins, it will be the last election ever for the Americans. In other words, he thinks that there will be the end of democracy. So he is at a point now where he amplifies his own voice. He is promoting people with vehemently far-right views. He is making Twitter much more of a right-wing ecosystem. And that is, at the very least, completely antithetical to what he started out by saying that Twitter should be. It is not. X is now a place where those views, I turn on my feed and it is absolutely rammed with really egregious views and disinformation about the hurricane, about FEMA, about the Democrats, about Republicans. It is very much geared towards the right wing at the moment, Twitter. And I just want to point that out, that he is not only publicly endorsing Trump and Vance, but going to their one of their most prominent rallies and giving a huge speech there. This is, and he has 200 million followers. He is promoting one side vastly over and above the other. So it is not politically neutral. He is not neutral. He has changed the coding so that his voice is amplified more on Twitter than anyone else is on Twitter, which is why whenever I turn on Twitter, he is at the top of my feed, and I can't help but read what he says unless I mute him or block him. And now we hear that in December, he's going to get rid of the mute and block functions. In other words, you are forced to endure a diet of vastly skewed right-wing political diatribes. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in. The rally, though, is something of a success for Trump, which is exactly what he needs. I mean, this is what it should be. I shouldn't have to be talking about this. Like in normal political times, you would be seeing both sides just pumping out high energy, well scripted, well delivered rallies to their electorate, or in very significant places. Now, this is in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is the state to win. This is very good for Trump to have had that rally in Butler, in Pennsylvania again. There's no doubt about it. Now, his kind of acolytes here, Gunter Eagleman, who is just like a Trump acolyte, Kamala can't do this. Of course, she can do this. She has filled venues that Trump has been unable to fill, and done it easily and with much greater energy. So this is it's simply empirically incorrect that you'd say, and loads of people are saying this, that there's no way she could afford to pay all those people to attend her rally, says another acolyte. History in the making, etc., etc. And of course, she's filled rallies, and you got all of this kind of rhetoric. I mean, going down and looking at threads like this is enough to make a grown man cry. But there you go. And here's Kamala's rally earlier this week, and of course that's not her speaking to a half-empty stadium. Now, if you want to see his half-empty stadium, when he was just about to speak, he moved the stage forward and had the whole back of the venue unfilled, right? So there's so much disinformation going around. And anyway, let's move on. What else has happened? Incredibly importantly, the dock workers' strike seems to have been sorted out. It's still early doors, early process in the agreement or potential agreement. So we'll keep an eye on this one. But this could have been the big October surprise in favour of the Republicans, as the strike was going to go ahead, or had taken place already for some days on certainly one of the coasts there. I think it was at the East Coast. You close the ports down, you stop the economy. End of. This had the potential to be absolutely phenomenal. Now, people were working behind the scenes. I think Pete Buttigieg is probably involved. It seems to have been averted, the crisis. And it seems to... So this is I don't want to get into the long weeds of this, but the ILA, the Longshoremen Union, is run by this chap Daggett, who appears to be a Trumpist. So Republicans aren't fans of the unions. Trump is not a fan of the unions. Just listen to everything he said about unions. And Biden was much more of a union person. He's the first president to have gone on a picket line, etc., etc. So you've got the Republicans and the Democrats, and you've got a union going on strike, but the union seems to have been one that more favours, or at least the leader more favours Trump. And so therefore people were claiming that this was strategically positioned to take place in just before the election, bring the economy to a halt, and show that the Democrats are weak or whatever. And it seems to have been sorted out early doors. That's very good news. Now, you've had Democrats. I've seen Democrats slag off the union because these dock workers are paid quite a lot of money. And if you are a neoliberal free market economist, actually you would be arguing for automation, for greater efficiency of the ports, like you see in places like China, where their ports are massively automated. They sit in these big rooms with computers, and the cranes and trucks are not driven at all by humans. They're automatically driven, they're automated systems, and it all works really efficiently. But of course you lose workers. Now, these workers are arguably, from an efficiency point of view, not necessary. And also they're paid very well. And these people are very highly paid workers who want to get paid more. So from a union point of view, they're doing their job to get their people paid more and kept in a job. But from a kind of neoliberal market should dictate X, Y, and Z, these guys need to be losing their jobs, and they need to be automated. And so you have a lot of Republicans not on the side of the unions, and then you have other Republicans on the side of the union here, because it's upsetting the democratic economic apple cart. And it's interesting to see this from an outsider, where you've got some Democrats who are pro-union, but also Democrats that realise that this union is using leverage from a Republican point of view to upset the apple cart. And so there seem to be both sides of the argument here have two sides of each party. So some Democrats who support the union, some Republicans who support the union, some Democrats who don't support the union, and some Republicans who don't support the union. And it's just a big hot mess. But that it's been potentially sorted out already is certainly good for, I'll say, for the Democrats, for their campaign, right? Aside of, putting aside the economic arguments there. Right, another bit of news. This wasn't widely reported, but there's some audio that came out of Donald Trump at a fundraising event. The audio is just really offensive of him. We've heard him have a go at migrants before, but it was just like really pretty much overt racist rhetoric there. I won't go into it, but you can go and find that out at a Colorado August fundraiser. Part of the course, really. We've seen the rhetoric at the rallies, but I think this was like taking it to an even slightly more disturbing level. Okay, the other thing that's been going on has been the huge controversy over the hurricane. We'll speak a little bit about this later, but you've got FEMA, the government agency that the Republicans, or at least Project 2025, want to get rid of. Interestingly, Republicans keep voting against funding to FEMA and then saying that FEMA aren't giving enough money to people who have suffered as a result, or to the states and counties that have suffered as a result of the Hurricane Helene. So it's complete capitalization from, I think, the Republicans here that is absolutely unwarranted, and that shows their double standards. Marjorie Taylor Greene has come out, and she's received an awful lot of pushback for this, and rightly so, by saying that the Democrats control the weather. She says, yes, they control the weather. It's ridiculous for anyone to lie and say it can't be done. I mean, it's a kind of WTF, as Molly Jong Fast here says. I would not have believed this had I not seen it for myself. And she's actually got involved with arguing with Marjorie Taylor Greene here. Yes, they control the weather. It's ridiculous for anyone to lie and say it can't be done. And then here's Marjorie Taylor Greene again saying, this is a map of the hurricane-affected areas with an overlay of electoral map by political party, shows how the hurricane devastation could affect the election. In other words, she's saying that the Democrats had the hurricane go through particular districts. And as someone says, wait, so we sent a hurricane during hurricane season to Hurricane Alley, where hurricanes naturally occur, after decades of somehow coercing Republicans to move to that hurricane area just so that Kamala could win in 2024. And then someone else says, the little bits of blue on that map have a hell of a lot more folks in them than red. But who am I to argue with someone who could hide Easter eggs from herself? In other words, like, this isn't just Republican area. They're ripping through high density population areas, which are Democrat areas. It's just obviously ridiculous. But this is who the Republicans are. This is MAGA Republicanism, right? What are you thinking? Well, why are these people voted into positions of power? It blows my mind that in Georgia, someone like this can be voted in. It is insane. She is insane. This is terrible. She needs to be voted out. I think it's Sean Harris who's running against her. Is that right? Good luck to him. And he's got a pretty good campaign, but she's in a really safe Republican seat, and it's highly unlikely that's going to happen. So the Washington Post has come out and actually done some fact checking here, and you are also hearing some Republicans do this. I was looking at a Republican on Twitter who's normally like a pretty MAGA Republican. He's saying, "Look, guys, can we stop the lying here? People need help, and you're lying and saying that FEMA aren't doing X, Y, and Z, and they frickin' are doing X, Y, and Z, and it's not helping." So actually, there is some Republican pushback. There's some pushback from Republican senators and lawmakers in these affected areas. Washington Post has done a fact check. No, Biden didn't take FEMA relief money to use on migrants, but Trump did. And it's interesting, as all the controversy that's coming out now, that Biden withheld money in California for the California wildfires, and he said, thinking it was an overtly Democratic area, and it wasn't until people pointed out that there were Republicans in that area that really need that help, and they showed some voter records, that he actually released money for California. We also know that he didn't release money for North Carolina in Hurricane Matthew. He only gave 1% of what was asked for by the governor there. So it's really controversial here. Also, Puerto Rico, if you remember, he was throwing like paper towels. He refused to give funding to Puerto Rico as well in what was one of the worst, I think, highest casualties, wasn't it? Puerto Rico, the storms that were there. He refused to help for weeks, and he cut funding to them. So it's absolutely horrific. It's really egregious and disingenuous that you would have a guy, or his peeps at least, slagging off FEMA and talking about Democrats not doing X, Y, and Z when they've released as much funding as they could, and the people that voted against that funding were the Republicans themselves, and now they're trying to use this against the Democrats. It's so unfair. It's bad. Anyway, here we have some more. So in a stunning, let's do a CNN fact check of the same kind of stuff.
I want to take a moment to fact check a claim that is spreading far and wide about FEMA disaster funding. Let's first listen to what we're hearing from former President Donald Trump.
They stole the FEMA money just like they stole it from a bank so they could give it to their illegal immigrants that they want to have vote for them this season.
And Republican Congressman Mike Waltz said on this show yesterday about people struggling with Helene's aftermath. This is what he said.
They're hearing from the DHS secretary they're out of money to help them, but they still have money to help people who have come to this country illegally. I think that's wrong on the face of it.
I want to go through the facts here. One, it is illegal for undocumented immigrants to vote in presidential elections. Two, Congress appropriates funds with intent for specific purposes. The money allocated to DHS for helping states to house migrants is separate, completely separate from the money for disasters. No money is being stolen from disaster relief. Three, FEMA says it has enough money for disaster relief for Helene, posting this fact check to its website. In fact, before the show, just to make sure I had all the facts right, did some digging, I spoke to a DHS official. That official says, as of this morning, $45 million from FEMA that has already been used for Helene disaster relief. The concern is if people hear that money is going elsewhere, they may not even apply for relief. The official says people should know there is money available now to help.
It's really important that this truth is outed because people are suffering, and to capitalize on that politically, I think is really cheap. And just to lie, I'm just so fed up of the lying that takes place. Okay, we're going to dip into this, which is thinking about policy detail. So there's been this grading Trump on a curve is a phrase that's often used, which is to say that to treat double standards in the way that people are approaching, like Kamala Harris in the Democrat campaign and manifesto and Trump's one, and saying, oh, she's so vague, and yet actually she's produced an 81-page economic document. Have you read that, Trump? Have you read that, Republican critic? No. So an 81-page economic document, and what's Trump done? And what's Trump, how's he detailing in public his economic policies? And when you make these accusations at Kamala Harris, are you saying the same things to Trump? Because actually everything she's doing and saying is far more detailed and granular than anything he's doing and saying.
Yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan.
I took a look at Donald Trump's website, his platform. So hers, I should note, has drop downs for everything. So you click on it and then you can read a couple paragraphs about how she would do it. And then they very smartly also talk about how Project 2025 would completely dismantle the way that they're going to approach it and what the outcome would be there if Donald Trump was able to win. But his site is as unspecific.
Project 25 is not Donald Trump.
Well, you should watch the interview with Caitlin Collins, of one of the founders of it, where he actually almost slips up and says it. Everyone at Heritage is laughing at the fact that Donald Trump is trying to pawn this off as if he's not related to it. But you go on his site and you look at his he denies everything, Judge. We talked about this. He says, seal the border and stop migrant invasion. No detail, no drop down. How are you going to do that? This is
what I mean about judging on a curb. Like that's his policy. We're going to stop this. How are you going to do it? You know, stop saying, I'm going to give you all $1 billion. Okay, brilliant. Anyone can say that. How are you going to do that? How are you funding this? Where's that coming from? That's a kind of detail that the Democrats are providing that the Republicans are not. And so to criticize the Democrats for being vague on their policies is completely disingenuous.
Do my favorite. Unite our country by bringing it to new and record levels of success. Well, that sounds nice. What does that mean? We know he doesn't have a plan for lowering inflation except to ask all the heads of the agencies to come together and do it. He thinks tariffs pay for childcare. He thinks tariffs pay for everything. So when you're going to ding her repeatedly for being unserious and lacking in detail, take a look at their actual platforms and see who the person who has detail is and who the person is that is completely lacking in specificity and seriousness.
Someone give this woman a raise, or at least...
She's absolutely amazing, Jessica Tarlov, and she is doing a tremendous job to show that actually the agenda that the manifesto, if you like, that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have is far more robust and detailed than anything that you can see on Trump's website or whatever. Most of what you see on Trump's websites are stuff appealing for money. So this is another one, and I haven't talked about this yet, but it is so sickening. Some of the things like the golden trainers, and then the assassination trainers trying to like grift on that, and then the coin, the commemorative coins, and his whole Bitcoin thing. But he's just he is desperate for money. The Republicans must be desperate for money. How much of the money that they're raising is going to his legal woes? Of course, when you see the small print on all the campaign financing, and this is why he's put Lara Trump in charge of the RNC, because he's merged basically the Trump campaign with the RNC, with the Republican campaign and the war chest, so that any money can be used for his legal woes. And you're wondering why they don't have enough money. You've got senators in certain places around the US screaming out for money, saying we have no resources.
This iconic piece of art is a testament to the unwavering resilience of President Donald J. Trump and the strength of the American spirit. This 9 3/4 inches tall, bronze-painted statue reminds us we must fight, fight, fight in order to reclaim the America we once knew, for our children and grandchildren. Don't miss the chance to own your very own art piece immortalizing this historic moment of God's protection over our 45th president, Donald J. Trump. This icon.
Bring in a bit of God as well there. Always a great thing. So you've got, I think that's $299. Yeah, it's $300 for that. There you go. Bish bash bosh. You've got this. So this is a famous one that people have been like jaw-droppingly reacting to. The Trump watch, right? So Trump's vastly overpriced $100,000 Swiss watch is probably made in China, experts say. Former president's new timepieces are a laughingstock of watch aficionados who cast doubt on their true origins, as airsats as the man himself. Right, okay, forget that. As in, I'm not really bothered about who makes them and how much money they are going to make per watch. I think he's got 147 of these, and he's basically selling them at $100,000 a pop, right? So if you buy one of these watches, you are giving $100,000 to goodness knows how much that is, probably, I don't know, $95,000 to the Trump campaign. Now, you can talk about how this shows that he's desperate for money and the fundraising is struggling, the Republican fundraising is struggling. But there's something far more serious that needs to be noted here, really serious. And it's to do with the legality of it. This is borderline illegal. So, I mean, think about it. A Saudi or Russian billionaire can just buy 100 watches from Trump at $100,000 a piece, and then Trump can put that money straight into the campaign. It's an open call for campaign finance fraud at scale. Definitely a possibility that Trump could launder the foreign watch money and dump it into his campaign. I think it's more likely he puts it into his own pocket. I view the whole scam as selling political favors from a possible future Trump administration. I'll buy your watch, but I need a favor. Quid pro quo, which, all funding, campaign finance funding is to some degree. But if you can allow these watches to be bought from abroad, you have an issue. So people are talking about this in terms of the legality of it. Disclaimer states that the buyer might never actually get a watch or watches. It's strictly a request for cash money. Wow. Absolutely incredible. Okay, let's move on to this. So this is 3 minutes straight of Donald Trump confusing and forgetting people's names, and now he is refusing to release his medical records. I'm not going to play you this. I've played you part of this video before where people used to slag off Biden for being demented, etc., but actually Trump has got a really long history of not speaking very well and seeming to have some people say there's more evidence he's got dementia-ridden brain than Biden. Biden's got an aged brain where you forget things, but you're not confusing people. So Biden will misspeak and struggle to speak sometimes. Bear in mind, he's also got a lifelong stutter. So he has a brain that's aged and he's forgetting things, but he doesn't confuse people. Whereas Trump actually goes, Nikki Haley is Nancy Pelosi, and actually she was the one that was there. And actually, no, she wasn't the one that was there. It was the other one that was there. And what you're doing is you're fundamentally confusing two whole people on a much deeper level. And he does this an awful lot. Anyway, point of me including this is that he's not releasing his medical records as well as his tax records. JD Vance and Trump are not releasing tax records. He's not releasing his medical records, whereas Walz and Kamala Harris have released the last 20 years of tax records. So make of that what you will. Right. Then the old, he doesn't know anything about Project 2025. You keep hearing, and you heard Judge Jeanine Pirro then on Fox kind of question Jessica Tarlov there.
She was given the responsibility of the border. I have Tom Homan lined up. We have the greatest people.
Just little things like saying, oh, I've got Tom Homan lined up in his administration for the border. Okay, brilliant. I don't know who he is. Okay. I'll let that go. So you could be watching that and just not think a single thing. But actually, he's an author of Project 2025. That 900-page booklet that he keeps trying to distance himself from. But as Jessica Tarlov says, everyone at Project 2020, everyone at Heritage Foundation that wrote it is laughing. They know that full well that he knows everything about it because he stood up in a freaking conference and pretty much talked about how, the Heritage Foundation, their Project 2025 is their blueprint for the next administration. So no one seriously believes that he doesn't know. He disavows it and doesn't have anything to do with it. He's putting in the people. Everyone that wrote it was part of his previous administration, and he's putting one author in. He's just admitted into his administration. So yeah. Anyway, this is a very strong political ad. Adam Kinzinger says, "Wow, this is one of the best political ads I've seen."
Kamala is mentally impaired. Joe Biden became mentally impaired. Kamala was born that way.
I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible.
They're poisoning the blood of our country. That's what they've done. They poison mental institutions and
thin air. I'm repeating them because my constituents are saying these things are happening. I mean,
but there's
just
no
yesterday,
evidence.
A video came out of a migrant 30 miles away eating a cat. Clearly, these rumors are out there because constituents are seeing it with their own eyes, and some of them are talking about it. Now, look, we also have to talk about
that here in this country, anything is possible, that nothing is out of reach. And America, where we care for one another, look out for one another, and recognize that we have so much more in common than what separates us.
I'm sick of being gaslit by some people I know, Republicans I know, who are trying to tell me that, and some people on my threads that, the Harris campaign is way more divisive than the Trump campaign. It's like, listen to the words. How can you ever possibly say that? I've only played this because I don't want to be like some just big campaign event for some propaganda spot for the Harris campaign. But I do really feel strongly about stuff like this, which is children that get to hear this rhetoric on both sides. Like, who is presenting a vision of what America can be, of what the positivity it that you can have, and the unity you can have, and who is painting a picture that is really damaging. And imagine having children listen to all the rhetoric of Trump and Vance, that real division, that immigrants are going to come into your kitchen and slit your throats. That kind of stuff, really. Like, imagine children listening to that and thinking how that's going to affect their development and their opinion of other humans. It's just this otherization. Helen Mirren, the British actress, came out and just talked really strongly the other day about how she didn't mention Trump, but she talked about his campaign just otherizing, just purely otherizing the whole groups of people. And it's not healthy. Mother Jones has got an article on Elon Musk has been funding Trump's anti-immigrant mastermind. Uncovered donations by the Wall Street Journal reveal that Musk has spent millions to back anti-immigrant and anti-transgender initiatives. So again, his politically neutral stance, it's the division that's going on there. Just pretty striking, it has to be said. And then we've got this. So as Rex Hupka says, good Lord, this is far beyond abhorrent. He's talking about going into a city and rounding up and deporting an entire community of legal immigrants. These are people who have done nothing wrong. In fact, Springfield companies rely on them. This is sick, and it is truly Hitlerian. Now, what they're trying to do is either redefine what legal migrants are, or just say they're illegal, ran them up and get them out. But people forget, or people don't realise the incredibly difficult process that will be involved in deporting 15 million migrants. These aren't people who have just come over the border. Like 15 million people haven't just come over the border in the last month. These people are just there, we're just going to round you up and send you back. These are people that have come over in the last 20, 30 years, who have married, who have got families, who have got jobs, etc., etc. You're going to take these people, you're going to round them up, and you're going to take them. What do you do with their children? What do you do? This is why the whole Dreamers debate is such an important one, because actually when people have integrated so much into society, to just round them up and get rid of them is not an easy thing, it's not a nice thing, it's not a compassionate thing, and it's also an economically difficult thing to do as well.
Springfield is such a beautiful place. Have you seen what's happened to it? It's been overrun. You can't do that to people. They have to be removed.
So you would revoke the temporary protected status?
Absolutely, I'd revoke it and I'd bring them back to their country. Springfield is such a beautiful.
So he'd revoke their legal status, basically saying, I don't care what the rules are, I'd just get rid of them anyway. And then think what that's doing to that community right now to listen to that. It's real shame. City of Erie, Pennsylvania is preparing a bill to cover the costs for Trump's recent rally there. So he's in Pennsylvania just now, obviously in Butler. He was in Erie recently. He still owes bills from the previous rallies going back to 2018 that he never paid. He's famous, where did he go? Where he had to land somewhere else because he couldn't go to the airport that was closed because he still owes the airport bills. Here's a grifter. Here's a people think he's this amazing businessman. He's a fraud. Mark Cuban keeps saying, he's conned people. Mark Cuban shares the studio with another one on Shark Tank, their version of Dragon's Den, and he was saying, look, she has this person I know, this other billionaire. She did a deal with Trump for selling some of the apartments in some condominium complex or whatever that Trump built, and she was like, she did $4 million worth of sales and work, and Trump hasn't paid her. Here's another billionaire who's done bona fide work. You owe me $4 million, and he's not paid her. And she's like, he's just a fraud. He is a fraud. And this is kind of what we see repeated throughout his life. He's been bankrupted 6 times for different entities he's owned have been bankrupted. He's been taken to court. $25 million he had to pay for the Trump Foundation, Trump University. Sorry, there's a Trump Foundation. He's not allowed to run charities, and his children aren't allowed to run charities. All that kind of stuff. Just absolutely incredible. And he owes these people all around the states for the rallies he's held, etc., etc. Right, 60 Minutes. So is it CBS on 60 Minutes? Anyway, they were due to have Trump on and Kamala Harris back to back, but not together, to be interviewed separately. He's now pulled out of that, so he's not doing that. He's not obviously pulled out of any debate against Harris, so that's worth remembering. Interesting question as to whether Harris should agree to go on Fox News and have debates, just to get out there and to speak to that audience. And yeah, so there you go. A few more bits and pieces. I have to take a little break though. I'll be back with you soon. Right, back in the zone. So this is a story that is, I think, okay. What happened originally? In Trump's tenure, there was an attack on US troops by Iran that caused a number of US troops to be injured. This is what Trump is saying about this now. And this kind of goes back to the whole argument about, no one ever dared attack us. No one, we weren't at war. Nothing ever happened. It's only Biden that has taken us to war. And I'm at this kind of peace, king of peace or whatever. And of course, he had to be stopped from going to war, the whole Soleimani thing with Iran and going to war, nuclear war with Iran, etc., etc. He had to be pulled back by his own administration, but, that's another story.
Do you think Israel should retaliate to these missile attacks from Iran? But also, do you believe that you should have been tougher on Iran after they had launched ballistic missiles in 2020 on U.S. forces in Iraq, leaving more than 100 U.S. soldiers injured?
So, first of all, injured. What does injured mean? Injured means you mean because they had a headache, because the bombs never hit the fort. So just so you understand, there was nobody ever tougher in Iraq. They had no money with me. They would have made any deal with me. I would have had a deal made within, literally, I would have had a deal made within 1 week after the election.
There's always unprovable counterfactuals. Putin never would have invaded Ukraine. They never would have gone to war with me. And these just completely unfalsifiable claims. But what was egregious here is the idea that these guys just had headaches.
They were dying to make a deal. And when you say not tough, they had no money. They had no money for Hamas. They had no money for Hezbollah. And when we hit them, they hit us. And they called us. And they said, we're going to shoot at your fort, but we're not going to hit it. And if you were a truthful reporter, which you're not, you would tell the following: none of those very accurate missiles hit our fort. They all hit outside. And there was nobody hurt other than the sound was loud. And some people said that hurt, and I accept that.
So nobody was hurt, but the sound was loud, and he said, because they had a headache. And then reality was that Trump mocks 100 US troops injured in Iran on his watch. They had a headache. This is how it's being reported by Rolling Stone. Nobody's tougher on me, etc., etc. In 2020, the Defense Department confirmed that 109 US service members were diagnosed with traumatic brain injuries after Iran attacked the Ain al-Assad airbase in Iraq. At the time, Trump appeared to dismiss the severity of the injuries and said, quote, I heard they had headaches and a couple of other things. But I would say, and I can report, it's not very serious. And, it might not be, people didn't die, but there were, of the 109, 75 returned to duty after being treated in Iraq. 1 returned to duty in Iraq after being treated in Germany. 27 were transported from Iraq to US medical facilities in Germany. 21 were transported from Germany to the US for treatment. 7 are currently en route from Iraq to Germany. 5 are still being evaluated. And this was what was written back in February 2020. So, it's just quite dismissive of the seriousness, and it might not have been the most serious of strikes, as in there were no deaths, but it is really, I think, dismissive of the plight of those US servicemen, and I think it landed quite badly that amongst many. Right, what else? So going back to the Hurricane Helene, Trump's GoFundMe had no. So he said, "I'm going to give $25 million to the victims or to the disaster relief or whatever." I'm not aware he's actually stumped up any cash himself, but I could be wrong. Let me know if I'm wrong. But what he has done is done a GoFundMe, which is, hey, I'm going to give $25 million, and that's going to come from you guys. So anyone got it? Says the billionaire. So Trump's GoFundMe has no mention of a specific charity to which these Hurricane Helene funds will be directed, nor any plan for how the donations will be distributed. Also, the fundraiser is organised by Trump's National Finance Director and Senior Advisor. Notably, Trump himself is not listed as one of the top donors to the fundraiser, suggesting he has yet to contribute financially to his own fundraising campaign. What does that tell you? And of course, in July, Trump's campaign set up a GoFundMe account to raise money for those killed and wounded when a gunman tried to assassinate Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. So now we're going from Hurricane Helene to the shooting in Pennsylvania. It has now raised more than $6.6 million. The bulk of that money has not yet been distributed, according to the widow of one victim and a lawyer for the other 2. So those victims are coming out saying, hang on, where's the money for what you raised for that incident? It's all rather dodgy, indeed. And then, going back to, and sorry, this is out of place. This should have been when I was talking about the hurricane. This is concerning the wildfire in California. And as I mentioned, the claim that Two former Trump White House officials told me, says Scott Waldman, they had to show voter data to Trump to get him to release disaster funding to California wildfire victims. He released it after learning that they had as many GOP supporters in Orange County as he did in Iowa. And this has come out recently, and it just kind of puts the whole reaction to the Hurricane Helene into a proper context for understanding that Trump isn't about supporting people for the sake of supporting, citizens of the US. He's about supporting people if they're Republican voters and if they're going to vote for him. He's about being so partisan as to exclude people from much needed disaster relief. Going back to, well, not back to anything we particularly mentioned, but this is a whole nepotism issue that's also worth reporting on, given that he's just openly admitted this. So as this account says, in a stunning announcement, Donald Trump just announced that he hires good people by hiring his children. Donald Trump, if elected, is going to make the White House the most nepotism-infested workplace in the country. Gross.
Talk about what it's like to work for Donald Trump. How do you hire leaders and put people in place that do that? Because I know you're obviously not there personally managing that, but you put a culture in place in your organization, and that applies to the administration as well.
The question's quite well formed, especially since he says you put a culture in place. The way he answers, you put a culture. Okay, you're the one that's in charge here. You put a culture in place. How do you put a good culture in place that breeds decent leadership? That I guess it's based on some kind of meritocracy, etc., etc. How do you implement such a culture?
Hiring people that are quality leaders.
Well, my son Eric is very much involved, and he runs a lot of it. And Don helps out a lot, and Ivanka to a lesser extent. She's a great mother and everything. She did a fantastic job in the administration.
I would love to know what's going on in this guy's head. I've just asked you a question: how you implement a culture to nurture leadership and etc., etc. And you've just given me complete nepotism. You've just given me how do you do this? You employ your son, your other son, and your daughter. What's going on in this guy's head?
What she wanted to do is get people jobs. And she'd go around and see Exxon and see Walmart. She wanted jobs for people. It's really pretty amazing. She could have had a very glamorous job, and she would have done well. But Eric's done a great job. And I did a similar type of job when I was doing it. Now I'm doing a thing called running for president, so I don't get... But we rebuilt Turnberry.
Dealt with. Talk about...
Just waffle and not answering. And to talk to this idea, you got Mark Cuban, who I've already mentioned.
Either. All we've seen Donald Trump do is hire his relatives, right? RNC, here comes the daughter-in-law. Who's going to speak for him? His two sons. Want to come up with a new... Hey, we got a new silver coin. Here come the sons. Hey, we got blockchain. We've got DeFi. Here comes another son. You haven't seen him work with... again, the family business is now the Republican... party. But more,
of course, Lara Trump is in charge of the RNC, and it's just, quite incredible. It is just one big sort of nepotism example. One big example of overt nepotism for sure. Okay, other bits of news that came in a little bit later than those nuggets that I selected. And of course, one of the big ones was the Jack Smith filing of the evidence in Trump's criminal case to do with election interference. As James Connor here says, I've read through the evidence section, the first 85 pages of Jack Smith's filing on Trump's private criminal efforts to stay empowered despite knowing that he had lost the election. The evidence is stunning. It's clear why Trump did not want the public to see this testimony. 13 things jumped out to me on Trump's attempt to defraud the American people and steal the 2020 election. 1. The evidence presented in Jack Smith's filing all comes from Trump insiders under oath. People within Trump's circle of trust, Republicans dedicated to Trump. This is really important. So the evidence for this, the great massive evidence that Jack Smith has assimilated, has compiled and synthesized is insider information, or it's an insider testimony. This isn't a case of Democrats having a go at Republicans. These are Republicans speaking truth to power. 2. Before election day, Trump told campaign insiders that he would declare victory regardless of the results, that he would assert that only votes on election day counted. Reason: Trump wanted to exclude mail-in ballots that he knew favoured Biden despite having voted by mail himself. 3. By November the 13th, Trump knew he had no evidence of election fraud and had lost legal challenges that could allow him to win the election by November the 13th. Still, Trump continued to lie publicly about election fraud. 4. Lawyers and campaign insiders repeatedly told Trump that his claims of election fraud were untrue, were BS, and they would be slaughtered in court. Trump responded, the details don't matter. When Trump couldn't get respectable lawyers to do what he wanted, Trump hired new crackpot lawyers who would. 5. Mike Pence was loyal up to the end. Pence repeatedly tried to talk Trump down and accept defeat as an intermission and advised that Trump could run again in 2024. 6. Trump personally set the fake electors plan in motion in early December. This is a quote. Ensured it was carried out by co-conspirators and campaign agents in the targeted states and monitored its progress. 7. Many fake electors in the fake elector plot were conned. Alternate electors were told that they would only be used if Trump prevailed in legal cases, and when others figured out what they were doing was illegal, they were replaced. It was a scramble up to December the 14th to get fake electors assembled and fake documents signed. Trump was repeatedly updated during the entire process and gave public tweets saying the election would not be certified to provide cover for these fake electors. 8. Pence repeatedly refused to go along with the fake electors scheme. On January the 1st, Trump told Pence, quote, hundreds of thousands of people are going to hate your guts. You're too honest. Wow. That's absolutely fascinating. 9. As Trump's pressure campaign on Pence ramped up, Pence kept notes, at one point having 5 pages of contemporaneous notes from a meeting of all the batshit crazy stuff Trump was asserting and how Trump wanted Pence to throw out the lawful certifications. On January the 5th, when Pence refused yet again, Trump threatened Pence, quote, I'm going to have to say you did a great disservice. 10. Trump knew Pence had refused repeatedly to go along with the fake electors scheme when Trump issued a public statement on January the 5th, a lie giving false hopes to supporters attending the rally on January the 6th. Quote, the vice president and I are of total agreement that the vice president has the power to act. So, in other words, Trump is lying about Pence, trying to force Pence into a corner, and Pence had already said, I ain't doing that. 11. When Trump spoke at the Ellipse on January the 6th, he knew Pence wouldn't throw out the legally certified electors. Trump knew his only hope to delay the certification of Joe Biden was as president is the angry mob before him, which is why Trump encouraged them to march down to the Capitol. Trump lied to the crowd about false election claims. Trump lied to the crowd that states didn't mean to certify and wanted their certifications back. 12. Trump watched the mob attack the Capitol on TV. Even after the attack, when Trump learned certification would still proceed later that night around 7 p.m., Trump directed someone, we don't know, to make phone calls to Republican senators to try to stop certification. Jack Smith has voicemails of those messages. 13. It's still shocking how close America came to losing our democracy on January the 6th, 2024. Trump's coup nearly succeeded. People forget how freaking big this was, how absolutely anti-democratic, and yet the person who was trying to bring this about is the nominee and there's a very good chance of getting voted in November. It blows my mind that this is the case. Utterly shocking to see this evidence laid out and realise that corrupt judges on SCOTUS have kept Trump from being held accountable for his crimes up to now. So the immunity case allowing Trump that extra level of inoculation from the law. When you see this mountain of evidence, it sure looks like Trump isn't running to help America. He's running to make his case go away and stay out of jail. I absolutely agree with that. You can go and see that evidence. You can go and read it yourself, obviously. But I agree with that part of what, or a large part of what is underwriting Trump's campaign is a necessity to do this, an existential necessity. In order for him not to be in prison and not to be destitute and go through court and lose millions and millions and millions, he needs to be president. And he needs to hide behind presidential immunity on an ongoing basis. He absolutely needs to win, not for America, not for the good of the country, but for his own, saving his own ass. Now, speaking of which, i.e. the idea of, fake electors and people trying to claim that, it was all about Dominion and Smartmatic and it was all illegal and there was all this widespread fraud. A Mike Lindell associate and former Mazer Clark Tina Peters was sentenced the other day to 9 years in prison for her role in hacking Dominion voting machines to try and prove Trump won the 2020 election. It's absolutely incredible. And actually, what's really interesting is listening to the verdict in court and what the judge had to say. Tina Peters, former Colorado county clerk, was sentenced to 9 years behind bars for a voting system data breach scheme as part of a pro-Trump plot to steal the 2020 election. And it's just this idea that
turn around, ma'am.
We can't find the evidence. We'll commit crimes to either manipulate the evidence, invent the evidence, or would just break the law to try and find this evidence that we think exists. And it's just, as a result, she's ended up in prison. And rightly so. Of course, the Republicans think that this is just some kind of hatchet job witch hunt. It's well worth listening. I won't play it to you now. It's 3 minutes of the judge excoriating Tina Peters for tampering with voter data. As Ron Filipkowski said, it was brilliant. What struck me most was that it almost word for word applies to Trump. Worth a listen. It is actually, you could almost say she is a Trump proxy here, representing really all of his activities and desires, and she has fallen on the wrong side of the law, and what the judge says to her could easily be applied to Trump as well. And you wonder how this is being presented on Fox News. I do wonder all the time about how 50% of the population, or 46 to 47% of the population at the moment, still supports Trump enough to want to vote him in as their president. Surely they understand that he is morally bankrupt. But of course, for many people, they don't. Psychology is an amazing thing. The human psyche is very good at compartmentalizing, at reducing cognitive dissonance, and doing all sorts of mental heuristics and gerrymandering to make sure that you can continue believing what you want to believe. There's motivated reasoning involved, all sorts of different things that our brains do. But part of the problem is the very one-tracked media ecosystems we all live in, the echo chambers we all live in. And for the right, that is Fox News. And when Fox News doesn't air, like I've said before, Liz Cheney's speech, doesn't air the speeches of any of the Republicans speaking at the DNC, then you are not hearing the case, the permission structure for Republican voters to vote for Harris. This is so super important. It's very clever of the Republicans, of course, to use their propaganda arm of the Fox News to effectively inoculate the electorate from hearing what they need to hear. However, again, this is possibly a point in hand. We've got, in a stunning announcement, Donald Trump's former White House aide, Cassidy Hutchinson, just announced she's endorsing Kamala Harris. Will they hear about this on Fox News? Almost certainly not. But there you go. So she's another one. Also, 24 Wisconsin Republicans, including former lawmakers, other former elected officials, and a GOP sitting district attorney, have signed an open letter declaring their support for Democratic Vice President Kamala Harris. Quote, "We, the undersigned, are Republicans from across Wisconsin who bring the same message. Donald Trump does not align with the Wisconsin values. To ensure our democracy and our economy remain strong for another 4 years, we must elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz to the White House." Again, do the right people hear about this? Those swing voters, those potentially disaffected Republicans. People don't realize that they could be disaffected if they had the right information. And Ron Filipkowski here then talking about Melania Trump. So Melania Trump's just brought out, or bringing out a new book, a kind of memoir, which is probably not fascinating. I don't know, but it has some very important nuggets. And one is her very explicit defense of pro-choice ideology and defense of abortion, effectively, which is totally against what many of the MAGA crowd espouse. And that is becoming quite controversial, because here is a woman, like arguably the person who knows Donald Trump the most, and she's not anywhere to be seen. She's promoting a book, but outside of promoting a book, you don't see her. She is not out there campaigning with Trump in a way that Kamala Harris's husband is, Doug Emhoff. She is not out there espousing for a Trump administration. In fact, she has rejected that. She didn't speak at the RNC. She didn't even allow Trump to really touch her. She was up in the crowd when he was speaking, and when he went up to the crowd, she disappeared. They haven't been seen together effectively for months and months. She hates him, right? There's no doubt about that. She hates him. And she's getting into a bit of trouble because some of her views are not falling very well in those kind of right-wing circles. As this guy Stu Peters says, if Trump can't manage his own wife from publicly coming out in favour of abortion 1 month before the election, he definitely can't manage this country. So when you have right-wingers coming out and slamming Melania Trump for this, you know, as someone else says, he seems like a nice person, and he's not. But you know you're in a spot of bother there. And Trump was then called out on this by Fox News, actually. What's your reaction to Melania championing abortion?
What's your reaction to Melania's memoir about championing abortion rights and reproductive freedom? When you read it, what were your thoughts?
We spoke about it, and I said, you have to write...
By the way, this is a good answer. He's right.
We spoke about it, and I said, you have to write what you believe. I'm not going to tell you what to do. You have to write what you believe. She's very beloved. People love our former First Lady, I can tell you that. But I said, you have to stick with your heart. I've said that to everybody. You have to go with your heart. There are some people that are very, very far right on the issue, meaning without exceptions. And then there are other people that view it a little bit differently than that.
Kamala Harris is out on the... What's your reaction to...
And he's right, you know, yeah, but the problem is that doesn't sit very well with the very people who are kind of voting for you, single issue voters particularly, where abortion is the be all and end all. Right, to go back, sorry, some of these are all over the shop, but we just have JD Vance, who's been asked a couple of times, and this is one of the times. He was asked in a debate with Tim Walz, and Tim Walz said, well, that was a damning non-answer, which is absolutely right. So when questioned on the validity of the 2020 election, Vance has been really slippery. Now he's finally sort of come forth.
Who won the 2020 election? Could you just answer, did Donald Trump win, yes or no?
Yes.
He did win?
Yep.
So will you concede? Will you concede? If your opponent gets more votes, will you concede?
I really feel bad for you, man.
I just want to know, if your opponent gets more votes, will you concede?
And of course, he won't answer, but he did answer that Donald Trump won the election. So you've got two election deniers, and you've got that whole Jack Smith evidence out there now. Just quite incredible. Okay, the last thing I'm going to share with you is something I think is tremendously worrying. And when we talk about not just Trump, but actually the whole machine around him being anti-democratic or being a threat to democracy, I don't think many people, or not enough people, realise what's going on behind the scenes at state level, at county level, here and there, to challenge the election before it happens, or to challenge the election after it happens, but put all the things in place before the election takes place, so that if Kamala Harris wins, they can challenge those results straight away. And let's listen to Katy Kay and Antti Scaramucci here on The Rest is Politics US.
If Trump loses, does he contest the election?
Oh, yeah, he absolutely contests the election. And I think what is interesting is they are already launching a whole load of lawsuits in preparation for contesting the election. Lawsuits around things like whether they're ideally export it, but at least protect it at home. And the way to do that would be to rush towards a nuclear weapon.
I have no idea why that just went a bit nuts. Let's find that again. Right, start again.
And I think what is interesting is they are already launching a whole load of lawsuits in preparation for contesting the election. Lawsuits around things like whether there have been election fraud, whether there was proof of citizenship requirements, whether people missed their mail-in ballot deadlines, a whole bunch of things they were already contesting. Interestingly, only in the swing states, the majority of these, I think there have now been 90 lawsuits already this year, which is, I think, 3 times the number of lawsuits that were filed before Election Day in 2020. And you can see the Trump campaign kind of preparing the ground, because when you put something into a lawsuit, suddenly it becomes more kind of serious and has weight, rather than just saying, I think there's going to be election fraud, which he did at the rallies in 2016 and 2020, and that this election is going to be stolen. You kind of put it down as a legal document and you say, well, we've already filed a suit. After the election, it's that much easier for them to turn around and say, you see, we knew this was going to happen. We knew that dead people would be voting, and we knew that illegal immigrants would be voting. And we prepared already. We already launched those lawsuits. So I think there's absolutely no doubt that he's going to contest the election if he loses. What do you think?
I mean, the first thing I want to say is that he's a useful idiot for our adversaries. So this is exactly what the KGB would want. This is exactly what the totalitarian regimes around the world that are antagonists to the United States and to liberal democracies in the West. They want the voters to think that the elections are unfair. They want cynicism to pervade, and they want people to question the system that they're living in. And so this is an unfortunate consequence of Donald Trump. I'm not saying that there haven't been things on the margin that weren't right in every single election. Of course, like everything in life, there's probably things on the margin, but we know definitively that there was nothing in the 2020 election and nothing fraudulent that could have overturned that election and flipped it to Donald Trump.
Donald Trump's attorney general said as much.
Yeah, and also he raised money to do these lawsuits. He did a few lawsuits, but down deep in his heart, he knows that he lost that election fair and square, and there was really nothing to do. But this is something that Vladimir Putin would want. If you were sitting with him and he had a KGB or GRU strategy session, he'd be like, it would be wonderful if we could get one of the two candidates to question and hold into doubt the election in the United States, the largest, most successful 250 years standing Republican-oriented representative democracy. Let's see if we can demolish the idea that it actually is a democracy. People have a tendency towards conspiracy theory. People have a tendency to not believe things, and we could put this fear and instill doubt. So I find this the most despicable part of Donald Trump. And I find it reprehensible that somebody like Mike Howe, the executive director of the Oversight Project at the Heritage Foundation, which of course is the author of Project 2025, and I'm going to read this. He says that there's a 0% chance of a fair U.S. election. Okay, so I don't know, is he getting paid by Putin to say something like that? I mean, it's just literally nonsensical rubbish. So she would have to beat him by an incredibly wide margin. We'll have to see what happens. The second question, though, is he going to foment a revolution? Is he going to try to instigate a violent attack on the Capitol or some other type of attack? You know, the attack on the Capitol has already happened. So is he going to create violence in various states? What's on tap for this guy who is literally the most anti-American presidential candidate in the modern era? So what's on tap for him, you think?
So you have to kind of look at what they're pushing this time around. And there are two things that they seem to be particularly focused on in these lawsuits. One is getting states to count ballots by hand, which is time consuming and delays the process of certification. And into that time vacuum, you can start seeding conspiracy theories about the fact that, you know, illegal shenanigans are taking place. So that, I think there's that issue. And then the other issue, which I think gets to what might happen afterwards, is that the other real focus of these lawsuits that are being launched by Trump's allies is around illegal non-citizens voting. In Arizona and Nevada, there are two lawsuits underway that are charging the state with allowing non-citizens to vote. Now, according to the Heritage Foundation, which is that conservative-leaning think tank that's done a database of voting irregularities, there have only been, since 2002 in the United States, 85 cases involving non-citizens voting. I mean, this is minuscule. I mean, not even minuscule. I don't know what smaller than minuscule is.
infinitesimal. It is statistically utterly insignificant. But to kind of scare people with these ideas that there's this kind of widespread fraud taking place on a regular basis, and as a result, you need to do X, Y, and Z. What is really going on is you're actually trying to disenfranchise eligible voters who from voting and cause situations whereby you can take advantage of the chaos that ensues or the time lag that ensues by inserting your own chaos, etc., etc. It is incredibly, I think, disingenuous, again, to use that word, of the Republicans to be trying to do this, to use this lawfare in order to challenge what are tried and tested democratic processes that have time and time again showed that actually the US has one of the most secure voting systems in the world, especially given the sheer volume of votes that are totally legally taking place.
It is smaller than minuscule. Non-citizens do not vote in the United States. It's an illegal practice already, but the Trump campaign is already pushing that. And I think one of the things where I see potential for unrest and violence is you marry this narrative that non-citizens are going to vote in big numbers and, swing the election for the Democrats with what we keep hearing around Springfield, Ohio, and the denigration of these Haitian immigrants. And you kind of marry those two, and you can see where there would be a potential for violence. I mean, I can see that if the Trump campaign were to come out after the election and push the line that they had lost because non-citizens had voted and stolen the election from them, with already a sort of fermenting of hatred towards some of these immigrants, I think that's an area where you could get violence. I mean, I really hope not, but I've done reporting from Arizona. I spent quite a lot of time down there around the 2022 midterms, and I interviewed people who told me they had guns and they were prepared to go to war if Republicans lost. There wasn't a civil war, but I interviewed people who very seriously said, we will take up arms against people in our community. It'll be town against town, community against community, ethnic group against ethnic group. And that's how a civil war would start in this country. So I think there is a real risk for violence in the country.
Okay.
And I'll leave you with that incredibly upbeat note. It's very worrying. When you're saying that we cannot lose, the only way we can lose is if the Democrats cheat, then you are setting up a scenario whereby your entire kind of electorate are going to be feeling robbed in the event of a genuinely bona fide election that just happens to elect the opposition leader. You could well be seeing a really problematic reaction to a democratic, free and fair democratic election in November. Not that I think it's. I think there are elements when I say free and fair. I think there are problems, systemic problems with the US election system, the processes, the electoral college, and so on and so forth. I think there does need to be reform. I think there's a problem with. What was it? There used to be regulation on fairness within reporting of politics that doesn't exist anymore. And I think you're ending up getting entire ecosystems where disinformation can run rife. And it's incredibly dangerous. I think something needs to be tinkered with the American political system as it is disseminated, as those narratives are disseminated through media. Mainstream media enterprises, but then what do you then do with social media that then is becoming more and more prevalent? It's fewer and fewer people are watching television news, cable news. More people are getting their information from the internet, which is much harder to regulate, and you get a situation where you can just jump down a rabbit hole, immerse yourself in massive sort of disinformation and conspiracy theories, and feel completely justified in doing so because everyone around you believes the same, and you all kind of riff off each other and feed each other justification and information to back up your beliefs. It's a pretty worrying situation. Anyway, that's just my tuppence. Thank you for watching, guys. Take care. I know it's another long one from me. Take care. Hopefully some of this was of interest, and I'll speak to you soon.